Well, all right, folks. It has been a while. It's been too long, actually, since the last video. There's been a lot of distractions happening, and one or two little setbacks. Chief of which my airbrush giving up, which I still need to contact Iwata about, but I'll get to that as and when. In the meantime, I've gotten myself a little cheap replacement off of Amazon, which appears to be an Iwata clone. It's the difference is tangible. It's decidedly a bit more gritty in operation, if you know what I mean. It doesn't have that polishedness that the Iwata has, the original. It's definitely definitely a cheap knockoff version. But for I think it was £20, it'll do for now as a stand-in till I can get the other one sorted. So what I'm doing is trying to get things moving along because I've got some other projects I want to do. Mainly some sci-fi stuff. Probably either one of the Bandai spaceships, or the Hunter Killer tank from Terminator 2, the Pegasus models one, which is quite huge. There's not much to the model itself. It's like 117 parts or something, if I recall correctly. But it's huge, and it will get some new tracks that I will 3D print, which will be interesting. I've already done the model. I've shared some images on Facebook of it already. I might revisit it just while I can at the moment, just see if I can get some just to refine the model, the design. But yeah, that'll take a while to do, because I need to print 240 links. It's 120 pairs, because there's two different links per track. One has one ridge on the top, and another one has two ridges on it. But anyway, that's for down the line. I mean, there's more stuff I'd like to do. Just loads of fun, but I want to get this video, this project done and dusted, because it's starting to drag on a bit. Anyway, what we have here is the fuselage of the Corsair, and because I am a sucker for punishment, I am adding rivets to the aircraft. Now these rivets patterns, you don't necessarily need to do it on aircraft, especially if you're going to keep them fairly clean. But because these are going to feature somewhat prominently in the weathering process that I have planned, I decided I'd add them. It's a bit of a laborious process, but it does add a certain something, a little bit of extra, a little bit of detail to the aircraft, to the model. So yeah, now what I've done is I went to a website. I think it's airwar.ru. I'll put a link in the description down there. And they have it's a wealth of resources for aircraft drawings and patterns and rivet patterns and all sorts of interesting stuff. Amongst them is the Corsair. So this is the image that I've downloaded and printed, and it's not quite to scale, as you can tell. I'm going by this panel line to the tip of the tail, which if you see on, as you can see on this drawing, it's a bit of a shortfall. So what I did is I took the image into Photoshop. I'll swing the camera around across my very messy desk. So I brought the image into Photoshop. I cropped the image to the area that I needed, rescaled it, lined it up nice and straight so I can get a good dimension on it. Yeah, then rescaled it and then printed it 100% to get it at 48 scale. So what I did is I measured the kit from this panel line to the back, then cropped the image in the same place after straightening it out, and then resized it. And then I ended up with this, which I'll line these up, eyeball them. It's a bit tricky to show on camera, but it lines up pretty well. Tamiya really did a pretty decent job on this. Now the tools I'm using for that are, as you can tell, Rosie the Riveter tools. I'm using a double wheel and a single. Both are 0.55mm pitch, which record is apparently for 48 scale models, which is what this is, which is helpful. What I've done first is riveted long panel lines where I don't necessarily need to measure and line anything up per se. So I've put them on there. There's some other in-between ones as well, such as this line, because that one follows down from there, goes all the way around. This line here follows that way around. This one I did on a previous video, but I was very tired and very grumpy, so I'm not going to see that one unless I decide to put some outtakes at the end of this one. So it is a relatively simple process. It just takes time and patience. You shouldn't and fixing the odd stuff up where you're going along. And you're going along and then suddenly you go zoink off to one side and put a whole row of rivets in a place that you really shouldn't. Anyway, I'm not gonna do tons and tons tonight, because you know it's ironically it's not very riveting to watch someone add rivets. But what I'll do is I'll show you the process of what's involved in taking these images, stuff and these patterns and putting it onto the aircraft. Now apparently this is the F4U-4, but I don't really think there's going to be that much of a difference in where the main structure rivets are going to be, which is what I'm focusing on. And again, as I said before, I don't have a real one parked out in the garden, so I can't check if it is indeed in the correct place. So I'm just going to go by this, and this crunching sound is so sweet, very tasty. Okay, now we're dealing with curved surfaces here. And curved surfaces means that getting a ruler like this around there, that's not going to work. So we can use this stuff, Dymo tape, normally meant for labels. But that does, there's not that much flexing it that way. So what I've been using is a Tamiya vinyl flexible tape meant for going around curves. I'm using that as a guide. Okay, where shall we start? I mean, there's loads. Ideally what you should do is go panel by panel. It makes life fairly orderly. I won't say easy, but it definitely makes it orderly. I think what I'll do is start here behind the cockpit, and then I'll do this area between this panel and this panel here. So I've already got that line in there, which is this one. So I'll go from between here and here for this video, just doing the verticals. As I said, otherwise it'll be an incredibly tedious and long and boring video. And I've got so many of those already. Yeah, I can't be a one-trick pony. Okay, now, these come in very handy. First of all, I'm going to measure what the actual size is between these panel lines, in case I need to adjust accordingly. According to this, we're looking at a distance of about 24.68, is that 24? So 24.5 mil between these two here, which is wider than on the kit, which is irritating. Which means that we're going to have to do it a different way. We're going to have to. Sorry, I've got boxes falling over underneath the table. Proportionately scale this. In other words, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rows of rivets. I have to put that in there somehow in there. But what we do have is we have this panel line here and this row of rivets here, because this row follows that panel there, which is here. So I know that there's a row in between them in here. So what I will do is measure this. So measure between the rivets. That comes out at about 7 mil, which is more or less the same there. Which means that I can go 3.6 there. Yeah, if I measure that there, there appears to be a little detail right there. I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing about. Is it me or has the lighting gotten worse in here? No. So that's, was that 7.4? Was it, did I say? 7? 7.1. And on here it is pretty much the same. Right, so we're going to go halfway in that to through 7.3. Should be 7.35. What is 7.3? What am I talking about? 3.5. But I need to be at 3.55 because that's 7.1 divided by 2. I know what I'm doing. Honestly, I do. Apparently I'm a professional as well. Who knew? Let's see if we can mark this out. There. I'll do another measurement, or at least another mark down the bottom. I've got 2 points of reference. Actually, I'll do 3 because then I can curve the tape. make sure it goes, that it follows through. I have 3 points of reference. Don't know if you saw any of that, but I now have 1, 2, 3 points there. Take some of this stuff. Decent length, not too much. It's still, come on. Required to do some masking, although I don't know how much masking I'm going to be doing with this because the side of it's covered in dust. Right. Now I'll line up the tape with the dots I just drew. Hopefully also stay parallel to the previous line of rivets, which I absolutely haven't done. Right, let's try that again. We're putting too much tension on it. At least you know it's low tack, gentle ladies and gentlemen. Right, I'll do one side and then I'll do the other. So what you now got is a nice straight line parallel to the panel line there. In fact, probably continue all the way through. Lift that one up a bit. Just say parallel to that one. Check on the boy. We were trying to get him to sleep, or get him used to his own bed these days. So I can start having better night sleeps, which is a lie. It's never going to happen. Anyway, that's on for now. So what I'm going to do is going to start using the riveter, and I'll just follow the path along here, avoiding these guys. So I'll probably just start at that point. I'm probably going to obscure this for everyone now, but bear with me because I've got to keep an eye on what I'm doing. Just going to apply gentle pressure to it as I go along. There's no point digging in because you end up pushing so far into the plastic that the prongs bury themselves entirely in the fuselage, in the plastic, and that leads to create a line or even a cut in the surface, which is not exactly desirable. I'll demonstrate that on a spare piece of plastic in just a moment. There we go. I mean, once you get it all lined up, it's quite a simple and easy task. It's just getting it all lined up. carry through here. And there we go. Set that aside. There we have a nice neat row of rivets. It's tricky to see, but it is there. See, there it is. I will just gently put some rivets around this little hatch here to suggest that there's a structure behind it. No idea what it is or if it should even be there in the first place, but I may as well add some detail to it. Kind of a test of motivation, this sort of thing. Yeah. That's that. Now let me show you what happens if you with the difference in pressure. I can find some spare plastic. And to the scrap box we go. Rummage. I suppose this will work. Okay, so this is a gentle press, and then a hefty press. Of course, this will have no difference whatsoever because this styrene is a lot harder. Let's try that one again. That's better. All right. So this, if you can make it out, is the gentle press. Some very subtle, slight rivets. And then that is what happens if you push too hard, which is not what you're after. Cool. Well, I'll be honest, there's not that much more to discuss with that. Again, riveting is entirely up to you, and the tools of which you use for that are entirely up to you as well. I mean, some people find it very therapeutic to take a needle and just push each rivet in themselves, but by hand. It's very, very old school. Another way of doing it is you take masking tape This is in the painting stage. You take masking tape and then punch the holes in that. You overlay that onto the area that you wanted to paint, and then you spray some light paint onto that, and you create all the little rivet heads that way. Now the tools, these Rosie the Riveter tools by Peter Dusek, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. They're quite expensive, but they're very good. An alternative is this little thing by Trumpeter, which is what I've used in the past. It's a fairly coarse tool by comparison. It doesn't turn all that well here, and the rivet holes are noticeably more square. But it's affordable, and will quite happily do the job. Other things you would need would be the guides, something to guide your rivets with, be it this stuff, Dymo tape, or flexible ruler. I've got a sheet of copper here that I've used from time to time. There's also these nifty little photo etch tools by Hasegawa, and these are for scribing panels back into your aircraft. Should you have sanded them to oblivion. Not this one. There's another one around it somewhere. This is this one's by Airwaves. It's a bit tougher, but you'd use that to cut that or rescribe that fuel panel, fuel tank cover. It's not quite flexible. These are though, so this will quite happily conform to the aircraft to a degree. When you go too far, you'll end up bending this as well, because it is thin sheet metal after all. So yeah, and then when you stuff up, the best way to do it is to recover from that is to sand the area. I've been using this, which I believe, what is this, 800, 600 grit, 800 grit. It's just very fine sandpaper. Then painting a bead of Mr. Surfacer over it. Wait till that cures, then sand it back fully, and then restart. It's a pain, but yeah. Otherwise, you end up with rivet lines all over the place that we don't want them. So yeah, that's as I said, that's about it. I'm not going to bore you guys with all the others. I'll do that in my spare time. But I will share the results. Oh, and another reason I'm doing it's fuselage and then wings, is that if the wings are on here, you can't get it's a small radius, but you can't really get the roller in that corner. So this way it's all unencumbered. And I'll do the same with the wings. So as soon as this is done, it'll take me a few days, we can start putting the fuselage together, and then carrying on from there. I'm just trying to think what the process is going to be next. I've not got a fixed process. I tend to make it up as I go along and change it every time because I am fickle. I'm guessing. So I'm looking at this thinking, after I've riveted the fuselage and the wings, the tailplane, I'll assemble those and add the cowling and the cowl flaps, and then I will paint that. Are the flaps separate? Can't remember. I'd have to have a look. The instructions are there in a big pile of something somewhere. Let me zoom out. So yeah, it'll be assembling the fuselage, riveting the fuselage, riveting the wings, assembling the fuselage and wings together, taking care of any seams that may occur, such as underneath there. This is always a good place for a seam. This will be a good place for a seam, so I have to take care of those. Then add the temporarily fix the nose cone or the cowling. Then I'm going to start painting this. That'll be the fun part. I might do the engine. I will do the engine separately. I'm just trying to remember which sequence to do that in. I suppose I could do that because I'm going to leave the cowling off, and or at least not fix it, so that I can assemble and place the engine on its own after, so I don't have to mask it off and all that. Yeah, think about that. Well, it's going to be fun. There's going to be a lot of nice weathering going on here, because as I may have said before, the raised heads of the rivets, even on flush rivets, they can still be ever so slightly raised on the skin of the aircraft. They'll be the first ones to catch any sort of traffic. So the areas that I'll be focusing on will be the areas where the pilot will walk, which is here. Probably where the crew chief would help get him into the aircraft, which will be on this side. This area here, where you have the big prop blasting stuff over the wings, but also ground crew getting to the engine cowling or getting to the fuel. You notice there's some inspection covers here, which are, well, there's one there, which are hinged on this side, which means the logical place for someone to get to that would be standing on this part of the wing. So these will be the most worn areas on the aircraft's wing. I'd say probably up to about there, up to the just beyond the gun ports, and then the gun ports themselves, they will have some wear around them, especially around these fasteners. I think around here, these are all different shapes for the gun bay ammunition covers. We will look at adding wear to this part of the fuselage here, because that's where the pilot would climb into the aircraft and scrape over that edge. To a lesser extent on this side, because I believe pilots tend to get into the aircraft, on all aircraft, from the same side, which is, I believe, which is this side. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, that'll be it really. I'll be pre-shading to a degree, or at least what I'll do is I'll be pre-shading in such a way that I won't be turning it into a quilted mess of black and white stripes. What I'm going to do is I will look at the areas where there is an actual panel gap or a panel line. I've covered this. I may have covered this before as well, because that's just the way that you have a heavily matted and worn paint finish from sun and sea air and just general knackeredness. And if there's an actual panel line, let me just draw this. What happens is, and with a rivet as well, but more so the panel line, is you have, there's your aluminium plate, like that, and then your paint will be on there, like that. Sort of, because it's a panel, because it's paint, it'll sort of dip into there. As the aircraft moves and works, there might have that paint might kind of crack along there. Now, what happens with a matte finish? If you look at this under a microscope, you'll notice that a glossy finish is like that. There's your material underneath. So that's the paint kind of on a glossy finish. It's nice and smooth. Whereas on a dull finish or a weathered paint finish, here's your metal, here's your skin. Then if you look at the paint finish under a microscope, it'll look like this. And it's rough and it's grainy. So what that means, and that's what gives you your diffused matte look, is because the light comes in, and instead of on here, that just bounces off and you get a nice shine. In here, the light will come in and just sort of bounce around in there and just diffuse, and it won't be reflective as much as that. Anyway, so what happens here along these panel lines and panel gaps, especially around gun bays, radio hatches, engine cowlings and whatnot, inspection panels, is that you have a gap here where liquid can sit, and because insect, and because that's got all these, because it's got all these little ridges and hollows in it, you get capillary action. So a drop of water that would sit, let's see, that's glossy. There's a panel joint on something that's glossy. Some water would sit on there. The surface tension, the water will hold it there because there's nothing for it to sort of seep into. But if it's matte paint, what will happen is that this water drop will get sucked into the paint, like you would like a paper towel. It's basically the difference between a paper towel, which is rough and has texture, or magazine paper, which is smooth. You put a drop of water on like on the cover of a magazine. Put a drop of water on the cover of a magazine, and it'll just sort of bead off, unless you soak it good and proper. But you know, for the purposes of this demonstration, you know, it'll just roll off to a degree. Put it on paper toweling and just soak in. So that's what's happening there, and that will also happen to a degree around rivets, but not as much, not necessarily. So that means that the weathering will happen around this panel line, there. So those would be your major areas where I would add some heavier shading. Around this runner, around there, around these joints here, around here, and there's more stuff that goes on here as well. I mean, these are engine cowlings. So what happens is aircraft mechanic comes along, radial engines just pump out oil. They're just oily monsters. That's just a fact of life. So the aircraft engineer will come in, take a panel off, fix whatever's gone wrong, get covered in oil in the process, put the panel back on. You know, he'd be putting his hands up against the aircraft and leaning on it and getting all dirty. Then come the next rain cloud or moisture in the air, that will then just sort of like soak in and work its way into the painting. So this area here, around here, that'll be nice and weathered. There's some exhausts here. They'll also be pumping out rubbish. So the area just in the wing fold, so that's an exhaust, that's an exhaust. So just above the wing itself will be shaded to a degree. The airflow around these rivets will create patterns. So this will also be pre-shaded. But what I won't be doing is pre-shading all of these lines and stuff. Only where it makes sense that would happen. But I'll go over this on the day. So yeah, for now, that's the plan. So yeah, in the meantime, I will continue riveting this thing. And hopefully the next time round we'll be looking at a somewhat assembled aircraft as opposed to a stick with a fin on it. Right, thank you for watching and sticking with me, and hopefully see you again soon. Now normally I have a bit of capture software, but I don't have it installed on this machine. It's on my desktop at work. So you just have to bear with me when I do it with the old-fashioned way by pointing a camera at a screen, which is probably not the best way to do it, but bear with me. Here is the image in question. I'll just drag that into Photoshop. So I'll get old-fashioned drag and drop, and then this here, that is the area that we're after. I will select this section, just adjust the positioning of that, copy that, new image, and then paste it away. There we go. Close this, don't need this anymore. Don't save. Here we have the Corsair. Right. What I need is I need it from this line here to here. So what I'll do is I'll grab a guide and put that more or less there, and then put one along there. Now you notice that the aircraft or the image is a bit tail up. So what I'm going to laying on a paintbrush here. I really need to tidy up. I still haven't been able to get around to that. Anyway, I digress. The this panel line here, right here, is going to be my horizontal line, and that's going to be a vertical line. So I'm going to rotate the image, taking the rotation point, sticking it right about there, and then just turning it so that it lines up neatly. Like that. I'll just get another guide to make sure that all those lines are lining up, because these are also vertical panels. That looks good. So I've now got a neatly lined up Corsair. And I'll grab the crop tool as soon as I put some more guides in, because I'm going to... No, I'm good. I can use the crop tool now to just move this over to there and bring this in just a hair to get forward of that. Let's try that again, because I need to just get in a little bit closer. Oh, lovely rivet detail. It really is areas like this that need to be done neatly. So I said I was going to do it up to there, and then, whoops, up to this panel line, there. zoom out. That should be good. Keep that in play. Go about there. Right, crop that image so it's now at the panel line I need it at and at the tail. Now we go image size. Constrain proportions, make sure we keep that on. Width 405mm. No, let's just turn this up to 300. Then turn this up to 172mm, which is what we measured earlier. Hit OK. There we go. Now this image should be at the correct scale, more or less, depending on how accurate Tamiya is with their kits. So what we do now is we print. Go to my laser jet, that's good to go. And I'm going to turn some lights on now because nobody wants to see my face. There we go. I've got so much crap in this room, it's not even funny. Print. One. Is it 100% scale? One copy, don't need much more. Let's turn some more lights on in here now we've done that. Ooh. Here we go. There it is. No, it's all good. The panel line is in the right place. That's in the right place. That's in the right place. Yes, I'm just talking out of my rectum. Cool. So that means that I can now take one of these and so one of the strongest structures in nature is a triangle, which is what a tripod is, and I failed to adhere to the basic principles of a triangle, in other words, putting them as far apart as possible. I think those are now stuffed. Oh, trick shot, excellent. Anyway,